Hello, and welcome back to the Wild Violet Healing Podcast. I'm Erin, and this is the fourth episode of the On and Off the Mat series. Today I'm going to be talking about Jnana Yoga. I was previously pronouncing it wrong as Jnana. If you'll remember from the first episode in this series, Jnana Yoga is the mental path toward enlightenment. For this episode, I'm keeping my language consistent, but at the end, I translate it into how you can apply the ideas to your own religion. So I ask that you bear with me today and receive without judgment. Gyan has a couple translations: knowledge, knowing, awareness. To me, that sounds like it is talking about when we are mindful of what our brain is doing, at least as a starting point. When we are no longer unconscious to the thoughts and patterns in our minds and lives, but we are awake. When we can see the separation between our human and our higher self and begin to take action toward alignment. To make choices on what thoughts we allow, what patterns we disrupt and heal as we do the work on the path to enlightenment. To put this into practice in our daily lives, I think a useful first step is practicing mindfulness. Taking the time to learn the thought patterns and mental loops in our head, the fears and mental blocks. These are the devices that the ego has used to keep us, quote, safe in this lifetime. Technically, it has worked because if you're listening to this, you are alive. But are you living? Are you experiencing your best life, one without guilt, shame, and harshness directed toward you? Or are you confident in yourself, your value, and your meant to be here-ness? Are you afraid to take chances, to grow bigger into more space than you have been taking up thus far? Okay, I'll stop there and go back to how we practice this mindfulness. It's going to be different for everyone. There are tons of suggestions out there with different aims, many in particular for bringing you into the present moment. And that is useful. But what if you don't know exactly what your thoughts are saying, or you aren't practiced in listening to your inner voice? That is where we are trying to be within this concept in particular. The first time I was able to notice my thoughts was when I was practicing candle gazing during my yoga teacher training. I had lowered the lights to better see the flame, so there were fewer visual distractions. I was in a comfortable position, so my body was calm, and it was quiet enough that any remaining distractions could be ignored. And I finally heard that mental track in my mind. I was able to connect with myself that is outside of my thoughts because I could identify the thoughts and notice the separation. That awareness was my first successful step. And now that I had a better idea of what I was looking for, I could repeat it and find other ways that it worked. Just the other morning, I was by myself walking at my local YMCA. No music or podcast in my ears, no one to be talking to, but still people around. I was able to let my brain off its leash, as I think of my ADHD mind sometimes, and let my thoughts be seen as I engaged my body through walking. I kept my phone with me and was journaling into a notes app about a pattern I just noticed come to the surface, one worth exploring. Doing that didn't solve it, but it did the first step, bringing it to light, so I could be aware of when that pattern shows up next time and I can try to make a different choice, a different response rather than my habitual reaction. Because I wasn't actively trying to control my thoughts, or rather concentrate on boosting my executive function at the time, my thoughts did jump around. I didn't focus the entire time on identifying patterns. That was maybe 5 minutes at most. But I let my brain rest in its demands, and I was able to retreat inward for most of my walk and just watch my thoughts. This brought me to a level of peace and calm that I didn't have before I started practicing yoga and mindfulness. My point in comparing these two instances is that they were very different settings, but I was still able to do the work of trying to know myself without judgment and with compassion. Other places this has worked for me was when I was on a solo walk at a state park. But the activity that has allowed me to do this work most consistently has been journaling. I know I talked about journaling a bit in my first episode of this On and Off the Mat series, but I do want to expand more on that here. Using journal prompts to begin a habit of writing down thoughts is wonderful. That's a fantastic place to start, particularly if you don't think you can write or don't believe you have anything to say. For those that tried to have a diary as a kid and it failed, a printed journal with these prompts already sitting there is super accessible as long as the content of those prompts feels accessible to you. A blank journal and a list of prompts from the internet that lend more to jumping around and picking and choosing what to write about might be easier, or it might be overwhelming. You won't know until you try something. Journaling on paper isn't the end all be all of this practice either. Yes, it tends to be most effective, but that does not mean the other options you can use are ineffective. If I have been on a break from journaling, typing a stream of consciousness into a Word doc is very easy for me, but I am really comfortable when typing. I don't enjoy writing with a pencil, so I have tested out different pens and colors to find what works best for me. Little pieces that make me happier and bring me joy even before I start. The cheapest option is the paper you already have, but the feel and color of the paper affects my experience while writing, so I took time to find a journal that works. And I went through a lot of options. If writing or typing isn't great for you, use dictation. Technology can be awesome to help us get closer to our goals. Your path does not need to look like the majority. It's yours. A lot of us with ADHD struggle with consistency. We don't really form habits. We have to make the choice to do or not do something again and again every day. It helps when we can pin a new activity to one that is already set into the flow of the day. My journaling time has jumped around a lot over the years. For a while, it was after breakfast in the morning flow sequence was finished. I would sit down at my printed journal with multiple little prompts for each day with a special drink and have 20 minutes to myself. To better explain, this was an undated journal, so I got to fill that part in and never had to feel bad about missing a day or having a blank page. It started with a line for gratitude, so I was starting to practice that every day. It had a line for something I wanted to release. Maybe that's a thought pattern, maybe that was a habit, maybe that was an idea, maybe that was a physical something, whatever. It also had a line for how I was feeling, and then an open ended space where I could dump thoughts onto as needed. These were all short and small spaces, so I didn't need to be intimidated by an entire page to fill with thoughts or feel like I was failing. It was training my brain toward how I was wanting to think, with gratitude, like I wasn't stuck, and to check in with myself and my body. I stuck with this printed journal for a few months, which means I filled a couple of them, before I was confident and wanted to make my time used with something more flexible. This is how I eventually found the journal style I use now. It is a blank notebook that is an A5 size, so not a full giant page, less intimidating still. On the top line, I put down things that are important to me: the current moon phase, zodiac cycle I'm in, and the date. Then I put down a gratitude. Then I put down a release. Then I repeat the overarching life goal or intention that I currently am working on. And I put down an affirmation. So that takes up at least a third of my page, those little prompts that I have a little habit for. And then I free write. Sometimes that is just dumping my day on the page because my brain is tired. Sometimes I write about an event or a decision that my mind is turning over and over. And sometimes I'm writing more about my thought patterns that I have most recently noticed and want to change. The last thing that I do with this space is auto writing. This is when I'm in a particular mental attitude or state, and I mentally take a step back from thinking about what to write, and I allow words to flow onto the page. When I do this, it often goes on to multiple pages, one of the benefits of using a blank notebook at this point. And when I do this, I consider it channeling deeper thoughts or accessing my higher self and receiving messages. Because my journaling practice, while structured, has built in flexibility, I'm able to do whatever I need at that time. I can still use prompts, such as ones offered in a book I am studying or in a course I'm taking. Those lend themselves to being deeper and more insightful than my usual daily practice, and I can choose to do them when I have the mental energy and time to dedicate to them. One more thing I want to address with journaling: when you lose the habit, when you miss a day, 2 days, more days, this is okay. I think about it kindly and with a lot of grace. It could be that something else changed in your daily life, so the time you had been journaling no longer works. It just needs to fit somewhere else. I was only journaling in the morning for about 6 months before I had to move it to evening. Then that evening time kept jumping around. And the cool thing is, the journal doesn't just evaporate into thin air. Well, hopefully not. I know it can be easy to misplace things. But my point is, you can always make the choice to journal again. Just one day, and just one day again. We still just make that choice over and over, even when sometimes we are real with ourselves and our time and choose no. We can always choose yes again later. Let me tell you a secret. I have only journaled a few times a month for the last several months. This after several years of regular daily journaling with only skipping once every couple of months. But here's the thing: I'm not being hypocritical by telling you journaling is awesome while I am not doing it. I have trained my brain enough that it is part of going to bed. I take a moment to mentally think of those short prompts: the gratitude, release, intention, affirmation. I still get the benefit of them, the positive energy from them, because even thinking about them is powerful. And do you know why I haven't needed the daily write about my day? Because my life drastically changed at the same time my journaling fell to the side. My stress level was significantly lowered. I had space in my day and in my brain. I didn't need to dedicate those 15, 20 minutes to journal because I could do the mental work in the moment for a lot of my day now. I still have my journal ready to go. I did initially try moving journaling time around in my day, but I didn't have the same pull for it. Now it serves as a tool when my days are more overwhelming and I need more processing help. Or again, when I'm using a prompt as part of something I'm studying. So that part of my practice has evolved, and that is okay. Now that I've thoroughly bored you about journaling practice, let's switch gears and talk again specifically about practicing Gyan Yoga. We have established that it is gaining knowledge and awareness of the ego and the true self. The ego is full of the worldly shadows and negative patterns that are concealing our true self, the one who is strong, kind, aligned, the one who is humble. And we have to humble ourselves to realize that we do not have deep, intimate knowledge of the self and the universal consciousness. From this place of humility, we can actually learn. We can hear the wisdom offered by teachers, sages, wise humans who have already done this work themselves. We aren't gaining knowledge for knowledge's sake. We aren't collecting courses and certifications for an ego boost. It is to learn how to apply it to your own life. Intelligence and wisdom are not the same thing. Intelligence can be more often used to fuel an ego, which is the opposite of what we're looking for by practicing Gyan Yoga. We want to gain knowledge and wisdom to lead better lives, in alignment with our higher self and for the greater good of all. To lead those better lives, we have to reflect on the teachings we have received. This is where a journaling practice can come into play as well. Not necessarily as a prompt, but as a vehicle for a conversation. You sit with the knowledge. You notice what resonated, what felt uncomfortable, where there might have been a light bulb moment, or what feels like it might have changed your life forever. But you interact with the knowledge you have learned. That could be through mindful interaction with another human, making a new choice that leads you down a different path, one that is hopefully more aligned. That could be through making a change in perspective, or dropping a poor habit, or adding a better one, but doing something with what we have learned instead of just collecting it like prizes to sit on a shelf and get dusty. Personally, I love learning. I have been my whole life. I continued taking courses that fit my interests and goals after college. But I have worked on doing so more intentionally as I have gained life experience. I see ads for courses in my interests all the time, but I don't just do them all the time anymore. I understand that some of those, it would be more impactful if I learned through experience rather than through the lens of someone else guiding me. That has allowed me more space to have experiences and space to do the work of integrating knowledge into my life. Things I have learned now have a greater purpose, a greater service. Reflecting on knowledge gained also includes discernment. We're all getting a crash course on determining what is AI and what is human made. Similarly, what trends are going around and what has stood the test of time. Practicing Gyan Yoga is figuring out what is truth and what is not. Truth is often hidden behind illusions, but teachings, in particular spiritual teachings, guide us to know how to look beyond to that universal truth. This last piece of having a Gyan Yoga practice is establishing a formal meditation practice, the kind where you build your concentration muscle so you can quiet your thoughts, the ego, until you can see beyond them to the higher self. This is where all the work of dissolving the ego and aligning your thoughts to truth allows you to intimately learn your higher self, the self that is connected to the universe as part of the whole. This is likely one of the hardest parts. When we are reading, studying, journaling, we are active in the mind. But here in meditation, we aren't adding or working. We're removing, slowing, finding stillness in the body, emotions, and mind. I will be doing an entire episode on meditation practices in the future, but until then, you can refer to my first episode where I talk about the fifth, sixth, and seventh limbs of the eight limbed path in Raja Yoga. So, I mentioned in my Karma Yoga episode that I was wondering about book clubs for yoga philosophy. I found that my school did have a monthly book club, the one I did my yoga teacher training through, and it just ended due to changing circumstances. So, yes, they are out there. I was able to get the list of previous books studied by them, so I have solid guidance for future reads, in addition to the many I have been collecting from other trusted sources in my courses and community. Honestly, it feels huge. So many books with goodness and value. But changing my perspective helped. I don't need to read them all now. I have books on my shelf that are waiting for when I will be open to receive their teachings. I have a brain that loves novelty too. So when something will inspire me in the future, it is okay to follow that soul nudge. I have my lifetime to learn. I can choose to learn on my own, or I can seek out others who feel called to learn from the same sources alongside me. The important part is that I do the work, that I make the time in my practice to learn, reflect, and apply the knowledge, that I do the mental work of illuminating my mind and healing my human self so I can know my higher self. I want to take a quick moment to make a point about books. All formats are valid. Is a print copy not available at your local stores or library? Find the ebook. Feel too busy? Find the audiobook and listen when you can actually absorb the information. Is a class lecture better for you than just reading a book? Perfect. There are courses that study yoga philosophy. There are classes just for the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali or whatever fits you. The way you gain information is personal and never to be judged. You just need to do it. So I wrote this episode a little differently from my previous ones. I kept the verbiage for the divine consistent here, instead of constantly referencing how you can fit these practices into your own religious beliefs. So I want to take a moment and address that here. Our human minds and the way they work is universal. Finding that mental track is universal. Everyone has thoughts playing in their mind. They may have different voices, a parent or relative, teacher, friend, or even enemy. We all start out by identifying that someone else's voice plays in our mind, and we have to discern if that voice speaks the truth or not, if it harms us or helps us connect with a better life. In this episode, I identified that the one noticing the thought patterns is the higher self, but you can also think of that as your soul, that pure being that lives on after this life in whatever form. Today, I referenced the universal consciousness, but that is the divine or your God, because that is what we are working on as we practice finding enlightenment, connection with God, with the divine. Enlightenment is union with that godly source. When I spoke of auto writing, that is letting your soul speak through you, or that voice of the Holy Spirit sharing a message. Getting more specifically into applying the practices, gaining knowledge and learning from teachers. That could be attending your church services and listening to sermons, going to Sunday school and Bible study. Those are particularly useful because you can reflect on the information in real time with others. Reading books by or about saints and holy workers in your religion. Spending time in prayer can be compared to a meditation practice, or in addition to. And I know that at least Christians are challenged all the time to look for the truth, however that's interpreted, to look beyond the distractions, illusions, sins of this world, and to find the holiness, the God in everything. That is what the practice of Jnana Yoga is all about. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you feel supported in exploring this path of yoga and inspired to make progress in your own life.